The paper hit my door so hard. It echoed through the house. I froze halfway down the hallway. Coffee still in my hand. That sharp slap of cardboard and metal still ringing in my ears. Not a knock. Not a doorbell. Just impact. I opened the door. And the smell of fresh ink hit me first. A certified notice. Stapled thick. Edges still crisp. Foreclosure. For $500. I read that line once. Then again. Then slower. Like maybe the number would change. If I blinked hard enough. It didn't. The sun was barely up. That pale orange light stretched across my porch. And somehow, my house already felt smaller. Quieter. Like it knew something I didn't. I stepped outside. Gravel crunched under my boots. Too loud in the silence. And that's when I saw her. Maggie Whitmore. Standing across the street. Perfectly still. Arms folded. Watching me read. She didn't wave. Didn't smile. Just a slight tilt of her head. Like she'd been waiting. For this exact moment. That didn't feel natural. It felt timed. I flipped through the pages. Violation notices. Late fees. Administrative penalties. I'd never seen before. Dates stacked tight. Almost overlapping. Too tight. It didn't add up. I keep records. I always have. My dad made sure of that. When I was 10. Standing in this same yard. With a tape measure in his hand. Measure twice. Write everything down. Never trust anyone else. To track your property. I could still hear his voice. Low. Steady. Like it was layered under the morning air. But these charges. They were new. Or maybe they weren't. And that was the problem. I couldn't tell. I walked back inside. The house smelled like old wood. And last night's coffee. Familiar. Solid. Mine. I set the papers on the kitchen counter. But they didn't stay flat. The edges curled up slightly. Like they didn't belong here either. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring. Then it buzzed again. And again. 3 times in a row. Not random. Not even close. I picked up on the 4th. Mr. Caldwell, the voice said. Smooth. Rehearsed. This is a courtesy call regarding your pending foreclosure. Courtesy. That word sat wrong. I looked out the window. Maggie was still. There. Same posture. Same stillness. Like she could hear every word. You have 10 days to settle the outstanding balance. The voice continued. Failure to comply will result in property seizure proceedings. 10 days. For $500. I almost laughed. But it caught in my throat. Because this wasn't about money. I could feel it. Like pressure behind my eyes. Like the air right before a storm. Who filed this? I asked. A pause. Just long enough to feel intentional. Willow Ridge Homeowners Association. Of course. I hung up. Didn't say another word. The silence after felt heavier than the call. I looked back at the papers. Then at the house. The walls. The floor. The old beam above the doorway. My dad never replaced. This place wasn't just property. It was history. And someone had just decided it was worth $500. That didn't make sense. Not even close. I picked up the top page again. Slower this time. Careful. That's when I saw it. The signature. At the bottom. And something about it was wrong. Not messy. Not rushed. Too clean. Too perfect. Like someone had practiced it. Like someone was trying. Very hard. To make it look real. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a notice. It was a setup. And whoever signed it didn't expect me to look twice. I held that page closer to the window, letting the morning light hit the signature at an angle. The ink looked darker there, thicker in places it should have been smooth. My name was printed clean above it, but the signature itself felt off. Too stiff. Like someone had copied it instead of writing it. I ran my thumb across the paper. Fresh. Not weeks old. Not months. Recent. That did not match the dates listed above. I flipped back through the notices again, slower this time. The sequence tightened the more I looked. Violations stacked just days apart. Sometimes hours. No way that was normal. HOA warnings never moved that fast. They always dragged things out. Gave you time to respond. Time to argue. This skipped all of that. Straight to penalties. Straight to escalation. Straight to foreclosure. I walked to the small desk in the corner of the living room. My desk. The one my dad built out of reclaimed oak. Every drawer still stuck a little when you pulled it. I opened the bottom one and pulled out my folder. Property records. Receipts. Every HOA letter I had ever received. I laid them side by side on the desk. The old letters smelled faintly like dust and paper. These new ones still carried that sharp chemical edge. Different paper weight, too. Slightly thinner. Cheaper. That was strange. HOAs loved their official stationery. Thick, expensive, almost theatrical. These felt rushed. Like someone needed them printed fast. I checked the letterhead. Same logo. Same address. But something in the alignment was off by a few millimeters. Enough to notice if you stared long enough. I leaned back in the chair. The wood creaked under my weight. My eyes moved from the papers to the window. Maggie was gone now. No car. No shadow. Just an empty street like nothing had happened. That felt worse. I picked up my phone and pulled up my bank app. HOA dues. Paid. Every month. On time. Automatic withdrawal. No gaps. No missed payments. The last charge had cleared just 2 weeks ago. I scrolled back further. 6 months. A year. Nothing unusual. No sudden increase. No special assessments. Nothing that could turn into $500 overnight. Unless it was never about dues. That thought landed heavier than it should have. I went back to the notice and read the fine print at the bottom. Legal language. Dense. Cold. Buried in the middle was a clause reference I had never seen before. Section 8.3.4. I did not remember that section existing. Not in the version I signed. I knew those bylaws better than most people in this neighborhood. I had read them cover to cover when I bought this place. Twice. That section number should have meant something. It did not. I stood up and walked toward the hallway closet. The door slid open with that soft scraping sound I had heard 1,000 times. Boxes stacked inside, labeled in my handwriting. Year by year. I reached for the one marked Original Documents. The cardboard felt dry, brittle at the edges. I pulled it down and set it on the floor. Dust lifted into the air, catching the light. I opened the lid. Old folders. Deeds. Surveys. Things my dad kept even when no one else would have. I hesitated for a second. Just a second. Then I started digging. Because whatever was happening here, it was not coming from the HOA I thought I knew. I pushed aside old tax forms and brittle envelopes until my fingers hit something thicker. A manila folder, heavier than the rest, edges worn smooth like it had been handled more than once. My dad's handwriting was across the tab. Block letters. Steady. Land file. That was it. No explanation. I pulled it out slowly. The cardboard rasped against the box, louder than it should have been. For a second, I just held it. Felt the weight. Something about it didn't match the rest. I flipped it open. The first page was a survey map. Yellowed, corners curled. My property outlined in thick black ink. I had seen this before. But not like this. There was a second outline. Fainter. Extending beyond my lot line. I leaned closer. The lines wrapped around the back of the subdivision, right where the HOA clubhouse sat. That did not make sense. I grabbed another sheet. Legal description. Long blocks of text, coordinates, boundaries. My eyes moved fast at first, then slowed. Parcel A. That was mine. Parcel B. I did not remember a Parcel B. I kept reading. The language shifted halfway down the page. Easement rights. Utility access. Then one line that made my chest tighten. Primary ownership retained. I read that again. Slower. Primary ownership retained. That was not easement language. That was control. I flipped to the next page. A deed. Dated 1982. Signed by my grandfather. The ink had faded, but the signature was unmistakable. Strong. Confident. Nothing like the one on that foreclosure notice. This one carried weight. The description listed 2 parcels. Not one. The second parcel matched the outline I had just seen. The clubhouse lot. I felt the air shift in the room. Subtle. Like the house was leaning in. I walked over to the window again. The street was still empty. Too empty. No cars. No movement. Just stillness sitting over everything. I looked back down at the document. There was a stamp in the corner. County record. Official. Filed and indexed. Not hidden. Not private. Just buried under time. Why would my dad keep this separate from everything else? Why label it so vaguely? Unless he did not want it found too easily. That thought stuck. I flipped deeper into the folder. More documents. Correspondence. Old letters between my grandfather and someone from the county. Discussions about zoning. About future development. About conditional transfer. I had never heard that term used this way. One letter had a line underlined twice. Ownership remains with the original party unless formally relinquished. No signature below that. Just a typed name. I checked the rest of the folder. No release form. No transfer document. Nothing that showed the land had ever changed hands. My pulse started to pick up. Slow at first. Then steadier. Because if this was right, the HOA was not just overreaching. They were standing on something they did not actually own. I closed the folder halfway and looked around the room. Same walls. Same furniture. But everything felt slightly off now. Like I had been looking at the wrong version of this place my whole life. I went back to the first page and traced the outline again with my finger. My property. Then the second parcel. The clubhouse. The parking lot. The landscaped entrance. All of it sitting inside that faint boundary. I stopped at the edge where the lines overlapped. That was the point. That was where things connected. And suddenly, that $500 notice did not look like a mistake anymore. I set the folder on the kitchen table and just stood there, staring at it like it might move on its own. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. Each second felt sharper. I grabbed my keys without thinking and headed for the door. Gravel crunched under my boots again, but this time it sounded different. Faster. I did not bother with coffee. Did not lock the door behind me. Something about this needed to be confirmed right now. The drive to the county records office took 12 minutes. It felt longer. Every red light stretched out like it was holding me back on purpose. When I finally pulled into the lot, the building looked exactly how I remembered. Beige walls. Fluorescent lights humming behind dusty windows. Nothing about it felt important. But what I had in that folder said otherwise. I pushed through the glass doors. The air inside was cool and stale, carrying that faint smell of paper and old carpet. A clerk looked up briefly, then back down at her screen. No urgency. No interest. That was good. I walked to the counter and slid the deed across. I need the full record on this parcel, I said. My voice sounded steady. More steady than I felt. She glanced at the paper, then typed a few keys. The keyboard clicks echoed in the quiet room. Too loud. She frowned slightly. Just for a second. Then it was gone. "This one is older," she said. "Might take a minute." That pause was not random. I could feel it. I stepped back and waited. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere in the building, a printer started up. Slow at first. Then faster. The sound rolled through the hallway like something waking up. A minute passed. Then 2. I checked my phone. No signal. That was strange. I had never lost signal in here before. The clerk called my name. I walked back up. She handed me a thicker stack this time. Fresh print. Warm to the touch. I flipped through the first few pages. Same survey. Same parcel numbers. But now there were additional notes, stamped across the margins. Legal annotations. Amendments. I slowed down. One line stood out immediately. No recorded transfer of primary parcel ownership. I looked up. "What does that mean?" I asked. She hesitated. "Not long. But long enough. It means," she said carefully, "the original ownership was never officially reassigned." The words hung there. Clean. Simple. Heavy. I felt something shift in my chest. Not panic. Not relief. Something sharper. I went back to the pages. There were references to development permits. HOA formation documents. All tied to that same parcel. But none of them showed a transfer. They showed usage. Access. Agreements. But not ownership. That line kept repeating in different forms. Like a quiet warning no one paid attention to. I flipped to the last page. A map. More detailed than mine. The HOA clubhouse sat right in the center of that second parcel. Parking lot. Entry sign. Even the walking path wrapped inside the boundary line. I traced it with my finger. Slow. Careful. Making sure I was not seeing what I wanted to see. The line did not move. It did not change. It stayed exactly where it was. I looked back at the clerk. She was watching me now. Not openly. But enough to notice. "Is there anything else?" she asked. Her voice was neutral, but her eyes were not. I shook my head and gathered the papers. As I turned to leave, the printer behind her started again. Another stack. Another file. I caught a glimpse of the top page as it slid out. My address. Same formatting. Same typeface as the notice on my door. That was not a coincidence. I pushed through the glass doors into the sunlight. The air outside felt warmer, heavier. I sat in my truck but did not start it. The papers rested on the passenger seat. Quiet. But louder than anything else in that moment. Because now I knew this was not just a mistake. And whoever filed that notice knew exactly what they were doing. I started the engine but did not move. The papers on the seat felt heavier than they should. My hands rested on the wheel, but my eyes stayed on that map. The clubhouse. The parking lot. The sign at the entrance. All of it sitting inside a boundary that did not belong to them. I exhaled slowly. The air inside the truck felt tight. This was not something you rushed. Not something you confronted head on. Not yet. I drove back slower this time. Every house I passed looked different. Same paint. Same lawns. But now I could see the pattern. Everything centered around that clubhouse. The place Maggie controlled. The place everyone answered to. That was not random. I pulled into my driveway and killed the engine. Silence dropped instantly. Thick. Still. My front door was still slightly open. I knew I had left it that way, but seeing it again felt wrong. Like someone had been inside. I pushed it open wider. The house greeted me with the same smell. Wood. Coffee. Dust. Nothing out of place. But I still checked every room. Slow. Careful. Just to be sure. When I got back to the kitchen, the foreclosure notice was still on the counter. Edges. Curled up like it was waiting for me. I placed the new documents beside it. Old truth next to new lie. The difference was obvious now. Too obvious. I pulled out my phone and opened the HOA portal. Logged in. Everything looked normal at first. Balance due. $500. Same number. Same urgency. But when I clicked into the details, something shifted. The timestamps. They were compressed. Multiple entries created within minutes of each other. That was not how this system worked. It never had. I refreshed the page. The entries reordered slightly. One disappeared. Then came back. That should not happen. I leaned closer to the screen. My reflection stared back faintly. Tired. Focused. Something deeper behind it. I clicked into the violation history. Most of them had no attached photos. No inspection notes. Just codes. Numbers. Enough to look official. Not enough to hold up under scrutiny. This was built fast. Too fast. Like someone needed it done before something else surfaced. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. I let it ring once. Twice. Then answered. Mr. Caldwell. The voice said again, same calm tone. We have not received your payment. I looked at the papers on the table. Then at the map. You filed that notice this morning, I said. Pretty fast for a $500 balance. A pause. Slightly longer this time. All actions taken are within HOA guidelines, he replied. Scripted. Clean. Empty. Which guidelines? I asked. Silence. Just for a second. Then, Section 8. No number. No detail. Just enough to sound correct. That confirmed it. He did not know. Or he was not supposed to say. You should take care of this quickly, he added. Things escalate. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. The house felt quieter than before. But now it was a different kind of quiet. Not confusion. Not uncertainty. Something sharper. Focused. I looked back at the deed. At that line. Primary ownership retained. Then at the clubhouse marked on the map. Everything connected now. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough to see the direction. This was not about collecting $500. This was about pushing me out before I realized what I was standing on. I sat down at the table and lined up every document again. Old. New. Official. Fabricated. Each piece had a place now. Each piece pointed somewhere. I picked up the original deed one more time. Held it steady under the light. The ink might have faded, but the meaning had not. And if they thought I was just going to pay and walk away, they had already made their biggest mistake. I did not sleep that night. The house stayed quiet, but my mind did not. Every few minutes I went back to the table, checking the same documents like they might change if I looked again. They never did. By morning, the light coming through the window felt colder. Sharper. I poured coffee but forgot to drink it. It just sat there, steam fading slowly. I kept staring at the map. That second parcel. The one nobody talked about. The one everything seemed to orbit around. I pulled out my phone and searched the HOA website again. This time I did not look at my account. I looked at their structure. Board members. Officers. Maggie Whitmore at the top. President. No surprise there. Beneath her, a list of committees. Finance. Compliance. Property management. Each one tied back to the same address. The clubhouse. That building was more than a meeting place. It was the center of control. I zoomed in on the address. Cross-checked it with the parcel number from my deed. Same coordinates. No difference. I leaned back in my chair. The wood creaked softly. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. They were operating on land they did not officially own. That should have stopped everything. It should have made their authority questionable at best. But it had not. Which meant one thing. Either nobody knew, Or nobody wanted to know. I stood up and walked outside. The air felt cooler than it should for this time of day. A light breeze moved through the trees, carrying that faint smell of cut grass and asphalt. Normal neighborhood sounds. But underneath it, something felt off. I looked down the street. A few neighbors were out. Walking dogs. Checking mail. Routine. Safe. None of them looked like they had any idea what was sitting under their feet. That part stuck with me. I walked back inside and grabbed the folder again. This time I flipped to the correspondence pages. Old letters. Back and forth between my grandfather and the county. One name kept appearing. A planning officer. Same name across multiple documents. Then I noticed something else. A later letter. Years after the original deed. Same officer. Different tone. Shorter. More formal. And one line circled in pen. Pending finalization of transfer documentation. I flipped to the next page. Nothing. No follow-up. No finalized transfer. Just silence after that point. Like something had stopped mid-process. I sat back down slowly. That gap mattered. A missing step in something that should have been completed. And if it was never completed, then legally, nothing changed. I checked the date on that last letter. It lined up with the early development of this neighborhood. Right before the HOA was formed. That was not random timing. I could feel it now. This was not just paperwork being overlooked. This was something left unfinished. Or something intentionally never finished. My phone buzzed again. Not the unknown number this time. A notification. HOA announcement. I opened it. Emergency board meeting. Tonight. At the clubhouse. That was fast. Too fast. I had not contacted anyone. Had not filed anything. And yet they were moving. Adjusting. Like they sensed something shifting. I looked back at the map. Then at the time on my phone. I had hours. Not days. Hours. Whatever they were planning, it was happening tonight. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing, not reacting. The folder stayed open on the table, every page laid out in a line like pieces of something bigger. I took photos of everything. Front. Back. Close up on signatures. Even the faded stamps. My phone filled with evidence faster than I expected. That felt important. If anything disappeared, I would still have it. I checked the time again. 4 hours until the meeting. The house felt different now. Not quiet. Not tense. Focused. Like everything inside, it was waiting for the same moment. I changed into a clean shirt. Nothing formal. Nothing that stood out. Just enough to look like I belonged there. That part mattered. I grabbed the original deed last. Slipped it into a plain folder. No labels. No markings. From the outside, it looked like nothing. That was the point. The drive to the clubhouse took less than 5 minutes. The sun was starting to drop, casting long shadows across the street. The building came into view slowly. White walls. Brick trim. American flag out front. It looked official. Solid. Like it had always been there. But now I knew better. I parked a little further down. Not in the main lot. I wanted to see who came and went. Cars were already lining up. Residents walking in groups. Some talking. Some quiet. No one looked alarmed. Just another HOA meeting to them. Routine. That almost made me smile. I stepped out of the truck and closed the door softly. The sound still echoed more than I expected. My boots hit the pavement. Slow. Controlled. I walked toward the entrance, feeling the slight change in ground beneath me as I crossed into that second parcel. It was subtle. Probably just in my head. But I noticed it anyway. The doors were already open. Warm light spilled out onto the walkway. Voices carried through. Low at first. Then clearer as I got closer. I stepped inside. The air smelled like coffee and polished wood. Folding chairs filled the room in neat rows. A long table at the front. Maggie stood behind it. Same posture as before. Straight. Composed. Like she owned the space completely. She glanced at me as I walked in. Just a flick of the eyes. Then back to her papers. But I caught it. Recognition. Not surprise. That meant something. I took a seat near the back. Close enough to hear everything. Far enough to watch. The room filled quickly. Murmurs. Chairs scraping lightly against the floor. Someone laughed in the corner. Too loud. Then quiet again. Maggie tapped the table once. Sharp. The room settled instantly. "We are here to address urgent compliance matters," she said. Her voice carried clean across the room. Controlled. Practiced. I felt the folder on my lap. Still. Waiting. She started listing violations. General at first. Then more specific. Property standards. Community integrity. Financial obligations. Each phrase carefully chosen. Each one building toward something. I could feel it coming. Then she said my name. Clear. Direct. The room shifted slightly. Heads turning. Eyes landing on me. "Failure to comply with dues has resulted in escalation," she continued. No hesitation. No doubt. Like the outcome was already decided. I did not move. Did not speak. Not yet. Because this was the moment they expected me to react. And I was not going to give them that. Maggie lifted a paper from the stack in front of her. The same format. The same typeface. Another notice. Prepared in advance. She looked straight at me this time. No smile. Just certainty. And that was when I realized they were already one step ahead of where they thought I was. The room went quiet in a way that felt controlled, not natural. Maggie held that paper like it was already law. I could hear the faint hum of the overhead lights, steady and cold. My name still hung in the air, heavier now that everyone was looking at me. I stayed seated. Hands still. Breathing even. That threw her off just a little. I saw it in the way her fingers adjusted the page. Just once. Small. But real. "Mr. Caldwell," she said again, sharper this time. "Do you intend to resolve this balance tonight?" The word balance echoed wrong. Too clean. Too simple for what this actually was. I leaned forward slightly, just enough to rest my elbows on my knees. The folder stayed closed in my hands. I did not open it yet. Not here. Not in the way she expected. "I have a question," I said. My voice carried farther than I thought it would. A few people shifted in their seats. Maggie's eyes narrowed just a fraction. "This is not a discussion forum," she replied quickly. Too quickly. That was telling. I nodded once, like I accepted that. Then I looked around the room instead of at her. Faces I recognized. Neighbors. People who trusted this system. People who thought these rules were grounded in something real. "Does anyone here know who owns this building?" I asked. The question landed flat at first. Confusion moved through the room in small waves. A few heads turned. Someone near the front frowned. Maggie did not answer. That silence was louder than anything she could have said. "The HOA owns it," she finally said, but her voice had changed. Slightly tighter. Less certain. I tilted my head. "Then why is there no recorded transfer?" I asked. That did it. A ripple moved across the room. Not loud, but noticeable. People started looking at each other now. Not at me. Not at Maggie. At each other. That meant doubt had entered the room. Maggie set the paper down on the table. Slow. Controlled. "I am not sure what you are implying," she said. The words were careful, but the edge was there now. I opened the folder. Not wide. Just enough to slide one document out. The original deed. The paper caught the light differently than everything else in that room. Older. Heavier. Real. I stood up. The chair legs scraped lightly against the floor. That sound cut through everything. I walked forward a few steps. Not all the way. Just enough to be seen clearly. This was filed in 1982. I said, holding it steady. It includes the parcel this building sits on. No one spoke. Not even Maggie. That was new. I flipped the page slowly. Let them hear it. That small, dry sound of old paper turning. There is no record of transfer. I added. Not in county records. Not anywhere. Maggie's expression did not break, but something behind it did. I could see it. The calculation. The shift. She had expected resistance. Maybe even anger. But not this. Not evidence. Not something that reached beyond her control. Someone in the second row leaned forward. What does that mean? They asked quietly. That question changed everything. Because now it was not just me speaking. It was the room starting to ask. I lowered the document slightly, just enough to look directly at Maggie. It means, I said, this entire association might not be standing on what it thinks it is. The silence that followed was different. Not controlled. Not managed. Unstable. And Maggie knew it. The silence did not break all at once. It cracked. Small at first. A chair shifted. Someone cleared their throat. Papers rustled lightly across the room. That steady control Maggie held just minutes ago was gone. Not collapsed, but slipping. I lowered the deed slightly, not enough to hide it, just enough to let the weight of it settle in. People were no longer looking at me the same way. They were looking at the space around me. At the floor. At the walls. Like they were trying to see something that had always been there but never questioned. Maggie straightened her posture. A slow inhale. She was recalibrating. This is being taken out of context, she said, voice firm again, but thinner now. The association has operated lawfully for years. The word lawfully hung there, but it did not land the same. I took one step closer. Not aggressive. Just deliberate. Then show the transfer, I said. Simple. Direct. That was the problem now. There was no place for her to hide inside complicated language. The room leaned in without meaning to. You could feel it. That quiet pull when people know something important is about to surface. Maggie glanced at the stack of documents in front of her. Not reading them. Just looking. Buying time. That was new. Someone near the back spoke up. Is that true? A different voice answered from the side. We have all been paying into this. The questions were spreading now. Not loud. Not chaotic. But enough. Enough to shift control away from the front of the room. Maggie tapped the table again, sharper this time. We will review all documentation appropriately, she said. This meeting is not the place for legal disputes. That sounded strong. But it was retreat. I could hear it. I set the deed down on the front table. Gently. The paper made a soft sound against the wood. Everyone heard it. It became a legal dispute when you filed foreclosure, I said. No raise in my voice. No emotion pushed forward. Just fact. That mattered more. Her eyes locked onto mine. This time there was no mask. Just calculation. Fast. Precise. She was running through options. None of them good. I slid one more page forward. The county record printout. Fresh ink. Clear statement. No recorded transfer. That line sat there like a boundary she could not cross. A man in the second row stood halfway, then stopped. Like he was not sure if he should speak or leave. That hesitation spread. People shifting. Reconsidering. The room no longer belonged to her. It did not belong to me either. It was something else now. Unstable ground. I stepped back slightly. Gave space. Let it breathe. Because this was not about winning the room. It was about letting the truth settle in without force. Maggie gathered her papers. Slow. Controlled again, but different now. Not authority. Containment. This meeting is adjourned, she said. No vote. No discussion. Just an end. But no one moved right away. That was the part she could not control anymore. I picked up my folder. The deed stayed on the table. I left it there on purpose. Let it sit in the center of everything. I turned and walked toward the door. The air outside felt cooler. Cleaner. The night had settled in while we were inside. Streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. I paused at the edge of the walkway and looked back once. Through the glass, I could still see the table. The paper. People gathering around it now. Not her. Them. That shift mattered more than anything else. I stepped off the curb onto the pavement. Solid. Real. The same ground I had walked on my whole life. Only now I understood what it actually was. And for the first time since that notice hit my door, the pressure was not on me anymore.